So, so team, like basically, like we started the requirement gathering, like before kickstart any front end or back end application, we should know the features, right? So we already listed out some features where user management and transaction management, and also the account management and admin component, where they have each component or each microservice have their own dedicated features, and we are going to implement as part of this internship program. And we noted down, like the technology stack we are going to use for this implementation is Java, Spring Boot as a microservice model, and also we are going to have a single page application using React.js framework, and like Tailwind CSS, or if any additional technology needed. And for a simplest purpose, like we are going to use a H2 database. H2 in memory is nothing but similar like SQL, where you can have columns or a table. I mean, according to our implementation, or also we can use AWS DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database. So this is the objective of this internship program, right? And what we discussed till now, I just summarize it quickly. So we have to understand that what is backend and what is front end, and how it is interact each other, and what are the technologies, how it is evolved, and what is in the market standard in IT industry, in our organization as an Yaazhtech, how we develop and make sure the customer performance centric application to be developed and delivered, and that we are going to share the knowledge to you as part of this program. And at the end, you will also give an opportunity to develop an application. Yeah. So coming back to that, like we identified the features. So those features, there we have two options. One is we can develop as a monolithic application or microservice based architecture. So when it comes to the monolithic application, it follows, like you have multiple features in a single application. For example, the user management or account management, transaction management, everything will be in a single source of code, and it will be deployed in one instance or server, and that server will be have a heavy implementation or heavy code. And the limitation of monolithic is like it is not parallel development is not possible. And also, if any issues in account management, your entire application you have to pull down, you have to make it as offline, then you have to fix the issues and you have to push it back. And when it comes to the scalability, when you wanted to have a multiple instance or multiple servers, or you need to handle the load. For example, we check some IRCTC websites and some government websites, it's taking a lot of load on particular time. For the ticket booking, it becomes a slow, right? The because of the load. So when we deploy into multiple servers to handle the load or to handle the traffic, then it has to be scaled well, right? So to scale well, the monolithic is not perfect because you have to scale the entire application. But when it comes to the microservice, you can scale the particular area of the service. For example, if the ticket booking or consider our account management service, or wherever the customer spends a lot of time or a lot of request will be having spend a much number of duration of time, we can keep those microservice alone as a multiple instances are scaled automatically according to the load. Consider is the authentication service or user management service, where it only used one authentication. The time spent mostly on the account management, they will see the account, they will download the statement, or they add the new beneficiary to the transfer account. Then a lot of spend time on account management. Then you can scale only the account management service as a multiple server, so that your application will be fast enough to accept the traffic. Yeah. So these are the basics, right? Now, before jumping to the development, first we will focus on the requirement gathering and understanding the implementation and what we are going to do and how we are going to develop. So I just cover the basic technologies, like anyway, the basics of Java, which you are going to learn yourself. What is concurrency and what is collections API, and what is the basics of Java, the OOPS concepts and all that you are going to apply it here. And on top of it, we are going to have a Spring framework. And what is Spring framework, I will explain in the upcoming time. And also now comes to talking to two systems, right? We were what is REST template? I mean, what is a REST implementation? What is the REST architecture? why we are using web services, what is REST, right? So that we were left there. I'd start from there. So consider you have application, front end application in Karthikeyan system, and the backend application in Kavya or whoever those systems, where both have physical IP and they have connected to network. They have a network IP now. They are communicating via HTTP protocol. I know from front end when they come give the data, they submit it, the data transmit to the backend via protocol, right? That we use HTTP protocol. Already explained you the HTTP methods where we have a get, put, post, and delete are the options. And mostly we're going to use the CRUD operations where create, read, update, delete. The create comes for post. The post can be used for create and update for both functions, and put is only for update, and the get is for to read the data whenever you need to read the data, for example account summary, or you need to see the dashboard data, you will go for read query. You will have a read data and delete for removing the customers, right? So consider you have this knowledge of HTTP protocol, you send the data, then you received your backend. The backend, it lands to the controller part. Like every Spring Boot application have a controller, and this launched the controller via REST implementation. That a REST controller. What is REST controller? The REST controller innovation starts from remote method invocation, which is RMI and Corba. You might learn it in your college days. Like those is the legacy technology that upgraded into the web services area. The web services is now in the market is a SOAP based web service and REST web service. The SOAP web service is nothing but it is a simple protocol, like which is a SOAP protocol, where this protocol, which is heavyweight, which is running on a UDDI. This was the initial web service created to communicate client and the server. So here, who's the client, who's server? Can anyone tell it? So who's client and who's server? So we have a backend application in Kavya system and a front end application in Karthikeyan system. Tell me who's client and server here. Can anyone try? I mean, just nothing wrong. Like you can give your input. Like you can choose which can be a server, which can be a client.
Sir, Karthikeyan be a client, sir. Kavya be a server.
Good, very good. How? How? Like maybe I'll explain how. That because you are client means like you are going to consume something, you are going to use, or you are going to give some data, or you are going to access some resource. Resource is nothing but a data, or it can be a file, or it can be a database, or it can be any resource you are going to modify. The resource, that's what it is called HTTP protocol, right? That it's going to change the resource. It's going to read the resource or change the resource, update the resource, which is resides in the backend, the database area. So that's called a server. So server is always talks about, don't confuse, like, front end also it's deployed in server. Yes, that is also deployed in a server, but the server implementation is different. The client and server interaction is different. The keywords maybe looks confusing you, but the client means who request or who, consume the operations or consume the data from the server, right? Yeah. The server, which is nothing but who's going to change the data or to change the resource. The contract between client and server. What is contract means? Like for example, I'm going to have these features like account management feature, user management feature, and these are all the features I'm going to have in the SOAP based web service that they'll create as a XML file. Like they mention all the features, like they mention all the features, and they will mention all the features, and they will create I hope my system is visible now. So they create all the features, and then like they will create like a WSDL, I mean the XML file. This is XSD, they call it as XSD. I'm talking about SOAP service. I'll write a SOAP service. So web service. Yeah. So they start with the XSD schema. The schema is nothing but it's talking about what are the methods, what are the features. For example, account management and user management. So I'm just writing some one or two, like not everything. So for example, each will have some methods, right? So those methods, they will detail it. Methods means like functions, like what are the functions they are going to do as part of account management. And then inside the functions, what are the input request, the request data. So what is the request data they are going to pass, and then what is the response they are going to get. So this everything will be formed and created as a XML file, as a XST schema. This will be loaded as a WSDL. WSDL is nothing but is a global WSDL, WSDL. This is will consider this XML file. This WSDL will be shared to the client. For example, you are the server. So SOAP service is a backend service which will have these all the features and which will hold the data, and those data will be shared to the some client, maybe multiple client, maybe one client or any number of client. So those client has to share this visual contract. This contract will have what are the features they are going to give, and also plus additional to that they will have the some authentication principle. Like for example, if they wanted to purchase your web service, the purchasing contract or licensing part and everything will be tracked in a WSDL, and this one WSDL will have everything. They can consume it, they can generate this Pojo classes. The Pojo is nothing but the plain Java object class, which will have the request and response model class. Based on that, if they have to set, if they mismatch, for example, you created XML data with a username and password, mobile number, or Aadhaar card, some details you mentioned it, some class like consider sign up class. But if they mismatch any attribute, then your request will not be successful. So that's what the contract speaks about. You have to use exact field. What are the field is mandatory, what are the field is not mandatory, everything will be mentioned here. That accordingly, that the end user, the client has to generate the visual from the code, Java code or JavaScript code. Then they has to write, they has to communicate the server to do any operations of account management or user management. Yeah. Now, but this is we are not going to develop SOAP service because SOAP is heavyweight. You can see the difference between SOAP and REST. It's a heavyweight, and also it accepts only XML request and response model. It will not accept, for example, if you are developing TikTok application or something like a Facebook application, you want to transmit the image and video, you want to have a multiple media type, then the best part is REST. This also similar like web service, like is also web service, REST web service. Okay, which also innovation of remote invocation method. It talks to one application to another application, the client to server, but it talks on HTTP protocol. Okay, that already explained to you the HTTP protocol what it is. So for example, you have backend as a server, front end as a client, which interacts through the HTTP protocol. That interaction, the same implementation, whatever you have implementations, the same implementation you'll have a backend web services, but here you will be sharing a endpoint, directly the endpoint. For example, you have HTTP, yes. For example, you have IP number, or just you have consider your domain. You have a Yaazhtech domain, and so you're developing application for your Yaazhtech application, then Yaazhtech domain colon, like for let's say it is on 8090 port number. Then you have account management. You are creating account management controller, and inside the controller you can have any functions, any methods. For example, method, I put a method one, like it can be sign up method, method one, or login method, or like transaction method, or whatever the method you have, you'll introduce. It's called a endpoint or URL. This endpoint will be created in a controller part of your backend application. That starts with controller. Okay, so controller, from front end, the HTTP method where you click from Karthikeyan system, it goes to the request. All the request will be launched to here, will be launched here to further implementation. But before coming to controller, how internally works? Internally, it works from HTTP servlet. That is all basic. That I'm not going to deep dive. Just I'm saying it for your understanding. As HTTP method, HTTP protocol, it first goes to HTTP servlet. and from HTTP servlet to it will go to the REST controller which you have implemented in your application. Yeah, that we will see it in a whole application level. I stop here to go in terms of implementation level. So this is the basics where you are going to implement, and you are going to follow model view controller architecture, where model it stands for your UI part, where you have a React based UI that called a model. Model. It talks about how the data, right? Let's come to the view. Like start with view. View is your UI part. So where you develop a React application and you view the data, you can do all the operation past of based of view functionalities. That is on the view. And controller, which I already explained you, which is on backend, where it controls the data, it controls the operations, each and every request and response. That's called controller, which is a backend. And comes to the model. Model is nothing but a database or file or whatever you are going to store the data. That's called a model, but model also is a part of backend. So the backend, it comes under, the C and M, controller and the model part. It's both clubbed with the one single part, which is a backend. Okay, so this is architecture we are going to implement, model view controller architecture. So view going to be a UI part, and model view controller and model going to be a backend part. Yeah. Now, hope you heard about REST template. But REST template, the advantage already told you, it can accept XML, but mostly we send a JSON. JSON is nothing but a key value pair. You might know about it, key value pair. And then either you can send an image or any file, or it can be a video or anything you can transmit from one system to another system by using a REST web service, and you can handle it. You can store in database, or you can do whatever operation you have. Yeah. Now, I hope I think covered almost the pretty basics part, pretty enough to jump to the implementation. Any questions? Maybe I'll cover about Spring Boot before start. What is Spring Boot? If any questions, please stop me before I start with the Spring Boot. Okay, sounds great. So to implement application, like we need to some have a program language. So that only we choose Java, but in the market we have a Python and also Golang. Golang is getting popular. Golang is by Google, and .NET is already older one. It is from Microsoft, and you might heard about Scala, and maybe the mother of everything. It starts from C++. So these and all you might heard of it. And now we are going to use Java, but you can use any language. It's not restricted to develop a backend. Even you, one more thing like JavaScript, Node.js, also you can use for a backend. So these are lot of languages available. You can develop using any language for the backend. It's not that okay, I have to use only Java for backend. It doesn't matter. Okay, but you should have proper networking advantages and talk to as a web application, and you can wisely choose each language have their own strong area, but it works for everything. But you need to know the where is the strong area. For example, if you are having artificial intelligence or a scripting part, or a lot of handling data, where you can go for Python. So Python is good for ML programmings. But when it comes to the web application, it's a strong foundation for Java, and also Go have a good foundation on that. Yeah, or even Node.js. Yeah. Okay. Now we choose language. Otherwise, Spring Boot. What is Spring Boot? What we have already language, and we are going to develop a Java code. And why we have a Spring Boot? So, for example, you can develop a multiple type of application. One is desktop application. So the desktop application is nothing but it is going to be in your desktop or your local IP or your intranet. You will run via command line. Okay, it's not going to be deployed to any cloud network or any Linux box to interact or to communicate one application to another application, which will be just started as a command line application, as a desktop application. You can see the console output, and it's a simple application where we do it in lab programs, right? That's a desktop applications. or sometimes we do desktop application for a middleware services. I mean, command line application for middleware services. So middleware services where it is not going to interact much, but it's going to give some responses. Okay, middleware services. Okay. Now coming to that next application, like where you are going to have controller, or I mean REST based web services. So the web services also can be middleware services, but it controls using REST or SOAP. Okay, according to your own implementation, you can use any protocol or any implementation way. You can use a REST or SOAP, but this going to interact through the network, where you are going to talk to each client and server, and you are going to interact data. Yeah, but to develop that, Spring Boot. Why Spring Boot? So Spring Boot, not for desktop application. Maybe you can use it for command application as well via Spring Boot. The Spring Boot comes for the important reason. Like for example, you have application, right? So two things are always important. One is your application has to be fast, right? The time management. If you click some button, if it is rotating for more than 1 minute, the client will be fed up, right? They will leave the application, they will not continue. So to have a effective time management or execution time, we need to maintain the time management as a time complexity. We can call it as a time complexity of your implementation. It is represented in a big O notation, big O function. It can be n, or that I'll explain you why n and n squared and all that we'll discuss. Then that is one part of the time management, and then second part is the memory management. So when it comes to the memory, for example, you are running an application, consider IRCTC application or some banking application. If there are 1 million user, uh, memory management. So when if you're 1 million users, if they are trying to hit at the same time, so what will happen? You need a lot of memory. You need a RAM memory. Like consider you are running a server in your desktop which has a RAM of 16 GB. So the 16 GB, the RAM will be used for your backend application or whatever application running in your system. So if it is not able to handle those number of objects, number of data, then automatically your system will be not responding mode, right? So you need to make sure the effective memory management. So how to create effective memory management, that will cover in a basic way. I'm not going to deep dive in a Java how the memory management works, but it's in a basic why the memory management need, and why these two things important for a programmer. You should make sure this two is important for your algorithm, what you write, what the logic you write, and that you need to make sure, right? So to do that, you need to do some strategy. In terms of Java, first you need to know solid principles. What is solid principles? So for example, when you create a class, when you create an object, how effectively you need to handle it, how effectively you have to create a relationships between one class to another class. So that you need to make sure, and how you have to make a dependency, and how you have to make substitutions, like how it is going to exchanged or reused. So those and all comes under solid principles. You can deep dive theoretical part yourself. And the solid principles is important thing where you need to make sure while writing a code. And then another part is design patterns. So design patterns talks about, like for example, you are creating an object. How effectively you are creating object? You are creating unused object or unwanted object. You are creating multiple object which is really not needed. Then you need effective design patterns to create object. For example, when you need a only singleton object, where you need only one object through the whole application, then you need to create a singleton object. When you need a prototype object, where it can be a different object for each user. For example, when a user object called a prototype object, where each user have a user data. For example, user one may be Balaji data, user two will be Renaka and Karthikeyan. So every user data is different, right? So every user has to be separate object. So then you need to create a user class or user object as a prototype. So it's not a singleton. So that you need to know what are the design patterns and how we can effectively create an object. That's called a creational design pattern. And then next one is called the structural. So structural design pattern is like consider how you have to structure your classes. So for example, you have a factory design pattern. You have some implementation to be hide, and you need to create a structure between how you are going to inject and connect different dependency objects. Then you will go for a structural design pattern. and behavioral. So next one is behavioral. So behavioral design pattern where you need to identify the behavior, and according to the behavior you need to create a new object. For an example, you have authentication principles, multiple authentication. For example, simple username based authentication, and 4P retail authentication, which means partial PIN, partial password, or OTP authentication, which is second two-factor authentication. Likewise, you may have a multiple authentication, right? So those and all comes to the behavior. Like for example, some customer will not be enabled for a two-factor. So you are not going to create those objects, or you upfront are going to you are going to utilize those authentication on demand. Then you need to keep a behavioral design pattern, create class accordingly, where we are not loading as a eager, you are doing a lazy loading. Yeah, so that's called a behavioral design pattern. Now, so to do this all this design pattern, you need to learn as a Java programmer, like early 2000, we do as everything taken care by programmer, Java programmer, where they need to read the solid principle, design patterns. Even still, we need to read, we need to understand each and everything. But now the Spring framework already implemented effectively these principles, especially solid principles, how you are going to dependency injections and all, and how you are going to do a design patterns, everything they implemented, they've created as a framework. See, this framework implemented in Java, okay, you can use it on top of Java implementation. See, Java code is a plain Java code where you can have your main method and your classes. You can create everything your own. You can manage your solid principles and design patterns, everything your own. That is also possible with a REST. Even with a REST implementation, you can create your own controller. You can do it without Spring Boot. Also, you can develop a backend. That's what we did it in early 2000s, and even now old application now does same. But now the latest applications, now I'm fully focused on today's fully on a backend side. I'm not going to cover anything front end today. And if any questions, you can stop me here. This is all about the application backend we are going to do. Now I'm going to do the practical. Any question till now? No. Okay. Now, how to create your, the backend application. So, for example, now we are going to start our account management service, right? We already discussed requirement gathering is done, and we already discussed what the component we are going to develop. There are multiple components we decided: user management and account management, transaction management. There are multiple components we have already finalized and decided. Now we are going to create those components. We are going to implement now. To implement, you can, the softwares. Maybe I'll cover the softwares. What is needed for the backend? Maybe slightly I'll cover about the softwares. So what are the softwares needed? Anybody can tell me like what is to be installed and what is needed? See, for a backend, you need to install JDK, which is Java Development Kit, okay, which will be having a JVM and JRE, which is going to run your backend. And then you need what else you need? You need to create a Maven project, Maven Spring Boot project. See, Maven is nothing but it's a build tool. What is build tool? See, for example, you develop some code. You know right, .exe file, you will install it. Whenever you have software, it will be .exe file. You'll double click and install. So how this .exe file is created? Something tool is created, right? This is created by build tool. That build tool can be, it is very old tool as Ant, and then Maven, and then now we are using Gradle as well. But Maven is much popular. So we are also using Maven. You can use anything. So any one of the builder tool you can use. But now we are using builder tool as a Maven. So what it does, you have your code, but it will create a deployable jar like .exe for Microsoft implementations or something says runnable in Windows. We'll create a .exe extension, but for Java applications it will be .jar. Your web application will be .war file. So once you create this, this is the one who you can run and deploy the whole bundled application, right? So the bundled application create with a builder tool after you develop. So that's what we are using Maven. Yeah. Now that will have a steps to how to. Now I will cover it later. Yeah. Now what tool you are going to install? JDK and Maven. Then for a backend, we need database. If you want, you are going to use DynamoDB. For a NoSQL database, we'll use DynamoDB or H2 in memory that you can use it any one of the DB. Consider DynamoDB, we are going to use a NoSQL database. Okay, so this is coming from AWS, which are going to install locally. We are going to run AWS NoSQL database for our implementation. Then this is what I think pretty enough for a backend. And then for a front end, we need to install Node.js with npm. Npm is nothing but like a how we have JRE. Similar way we have npm to run the front end code. The JavaScript converting TypeScript and converting to the Babel to runnable script, and it will be executed using npm. And then Node.js. Then what we need? Anyway, the tool. This is software, right? To run and development tool where we need to have a IntelliJ or any Eclipse. You are going to have a tool to develop your application, to configure all this implementation, to develop your code using IntelliJ. It's kind of workspace tool we can say, or IDE, like is a developer tool. Yeah. Similar way for Node.js and npm, we are going to have a VS Code, which is Visual Studio code, which is we are going to use for a front end implementation. We are going to develop it, and then what else? Third part is, I think that's it. Like we are going to use a React framework. That will be a library where we are going to use it to build and run everything. We are going to use npm. So this is simple. Yeah. Now coming back to these things you develop, right? You are going to maintain your code. Where you are going to maintain the code? For example, we are going to form a team. Team 1 is going to develop a user management. Team 2 is going to implement account management. Okay. Maybe we have these two development as of now. Later we'll go other features. So team 1 have a 5 people. Consider 5 people. So those 5 people going to work on a same application. Then how they are going to share the code each other? For example, they are creating one feature, another one creating another feature. Like you are going to divide the feature. Now, not one person going to develop whole application, right? So in every IT industry, the people will develop in the remote mode and they will share the code each other securely. To do that, we'll use a code control, code version control. So this version control we are going to use as of now GitHub or GitLab. There are a lot of tools available. You can use any tool or even RTC, not RTC. I think IBM tool something is we have. SVN. SVN is an old tool, very old SVN. Yes, IBM one. Okay, so we can use any tool. Maybe we can go for GitLab, but here how to create a repository. Repository means nothing but how to create your project. For example, you create a project and then you put your application here, and all 5 developers going to commit the code. Basically here what we do, we pull for taking download the code, and then you do modification. After you do modification, you do commit, and after commit you need to put some message. What is the commit message, what the work it is. Then you have to push, which means you are pushing the code to the server, GitHub server. Then you have to raise a pull request, like which is you are going to raise pull request. Where you are going to create a pull request where it will be validated and merged by the lead. Yeah. So this is a flow where we code flow where we maintain from getting a latest code and committing it and doing all your activities. Yeah. I think hope this is our developer environment, and this will be I mean the environment setup. Preeti and Mugil or Divakar or Praveen will help you. Okay, these four people will help you for further environment setup and further doubts if you have. For you can set up a call with them. Yeah. Now coming back to the creation. Now we are all set. Now consider you all environment setup ready now. Now where to start? How to create application? Because the initially GitHub will not have any code. It is empty, right? So we need to create the code. So how to create the code from the scratch? For that, for the backend code, we are using Spring Initializer. You can create without Spring Initializer as well. You can create your own, like using IntelliJ also. But this is a tool where available. You can choose your technology and you can add a dependency to create your application. Yeah. See here, you can see your project type. It can be a Gradle or Maven or any, right? I told you like build tools, right? We are going to have a Maven, and Kotlin also is a language. Groovy also is a language where we can develop your Spring Boot application using, because this framework supports Kotlin and Groovy as well, not only Java. So every framework supports certain languages. You should know what language supports. Accordingly, you can write your code. So we choose Java, and then snapshot versions always not stable. So we can go for a stable version 3.5.3, and then we have a group ID and artifactory and name and description and all other details. So here you are going to create account management. So and also you're working for Yaazhtech, you have to create a first the organization name. So what organization is going to be a group, it is a standard. And then you can mention your project artifactory. Maybe here you can mention artifactory. It is going to be a user management, right? So maybe you can write a user management, or you can simply have a user or user management, that up to your own. You can create your own word. Okay, management. And then next you can put some description. So the description where you can start write your own description, like what it's going to do. So this application is developed to handle user data to do auth n, which means authentication, auth z, which means authorization operations. Do author of do operations. That's a simple sentence. You can write your own. That's it. And then I can see some extra dot here. I will remove this extra dot. So it's pretty clear. See, what is artifact ID? So you created this application, this you deployed somewhere, right? So anyone can use this, right? So anyone if you wanted to share for across your team, this component, so they can refer this artifact ID from the artifactory, which is artifact nothing but they will store all your company implementation. For Maven artifactory, they will all implement they will store there. They can use this. Somebody they want to implement, they don't want to implement user management within Yaazhtech. They want to use this implementation, they can reuse it. So how can use it? They used to have artifact ID, they use this ID to access this application. Yeah. Now, packaging for deployment package, it's going to be a jar because it is not a web application. It's only for a backend. Backend going to be a jar, and then you can use any Java version. I'm going to use a Java 11. I'm Java 17. This is already selected. Now, next step, you need to create dependency. So this is the important area. So this dependent already I told you, right? Like they handled it, certain operations where you can have their own implementation. You can add those implementation and you can reuse the functionality. That's how the Spring framework reduce your development work, and it helps you to integrate with the multiple functionalities. Yeah. For example, you are going to use a Spring Boot REST application, right? So Spring Boot web, where see you can see here you can use a build web including RESTful using MEC architecture. So we need this library. It's called a library. So I'm going to add this library. That's it. So if I wanted to have a database, if I wanted to have a DynamoDB database, then I need to add a DynamoDB. So or we need any particular database available that you can pick it up. So accordingly, you can take whatever implementation you need. If you want to connect the cloud, you can take a cloud implementation. So there are a lot of implementation available here. You can reuse it. For example, if you wanted to have some XML based, something you want to generate a PDF, or you wanted to have any specific implementation already available in the market, you don't need to develop your own code for all the utility functionalities. You can uh, add a dependency and then it will be added in your implementation here. Okay, I just click explore, and if you see explore, you can see the SRC folder. This is the basic implementation structure. This is your first project. So the project structure, this is how it will be for a Spring Boot backend application. You can see here group ID and artifact ID, which is Spring Boot one, and what our group ID is common.Yaazhtech, and artifact ID you can whatever you mentioned that will be created here. This pom.xml is a implementation file. Yeah. So this will have a complete dependency. For example, what are you are going to dependent? You are dependent on Spring Boot Starter Web. Whatever you added in a previous page, it will be created as a build tool. And then finally, it is going to build configuration. This is the build plugins. So using this plugin only, it is building it. Yeah. Then comes to the Java part code. So Java part, every Java code will be under SRC folder. In the SRC folder, you can see two folder. One is main, one is test. So we are doing a test-driven development. For example, whatever implementation you write, you have to write a test cases, whether how it works well. The main package is only for a Java code. So where you will start implement here. You will start implement the package you already created Java, COM, and Yaazhtech user management. This is your starting application. Here you can see the main method. The main method of, for Java, the main method is a starting point where your application will start from here. If you want additional class, you can create from here. So at the rate Spring Boot annotation, it represents the Spring Boot application. And then this resource folder used for a properties. For example, if you have any database, you have to put your data property here, and which will be, use this property file to represent the property area. That's it. Then coming to test. Test class is nothing but whatever class you write, whatever package you have in a main, same package you have to write here, and you have to write the same class, but at the end, you have to mention test. You can see here test. So which means it's a test class, and it is have a Spring Boot test, which is going to test your context load, which means the initial life cycle of Spring Boot. It will load the context where it is have a service init methods. It will load and it will check whether application is runnable or not. It's a basic test case. Whenever you write a logic, you have to introduce your own test method like this, and you have to test the logic. So this is the basic about the backend application creation, and I'm going to download it. And once you download, you will have your application downloaded here, and then now you can unwrap it, and after unwrapping you can load it in your IntelliJ. Then you can check all other code wise, like how it is implemented. Yeah, so from where we will start our implementation. Okay, so this is the first step. Yeah. uh, yeah, so any question from now? I mean, I'm going to stop here for today, and from tomorrow, Preeti will assist you to set up environment. Maybe today, if you have some time, she will connect with you, and she will assist you on setting up and creating the project like this in your system. And you are going to keep it in your, I mean, start, run, and execute you in your system. And I will come here and there whenever you have doubt. Yeah. So you can stop recording the Divakar, and that's it for the technical stuff for today. Any questions before wind up the call? Any questions from anyone? No questions? Okay. Then finally we divide the team. Okay. So let's focus on the team divide, and then we can drop. Can you tell me who want to part of user management? I mean, I just wanted names, your own interest. So whoever wants to be part of user management can please tell your name. Maybe Mugil is busy. I will keep Praveen. Mugil will help you after when you're something. Yeah. So I mean, we will assist you. Like it's not that you are going to develop this 10 days internship, like where every day we will develop bits and pieces. Like now, we just created a project, right? We nothing did much. We just created a project. We covered a theoretical. From tomorrow, we will start this application and run application. That will start from tomorrow. Yeah. So I don't want to take too much of time. Already we covered 2 hours. So just we'll divide the team and we can talk for the day. So can anyone, I mean, can you please tell me your names who want to part of team one? I will
Sir,
name
myself,
it as,
Jashwin,
yeah, what's your name?
Jashwin Pratap, sir.
Okay. Jaswin Pratap. Okay. I'll note down. Maybe Preeti, can you note down yourself? My system is slow. Can you note down?
Sure, sir.
Yeah, Preeti and Praveen, please note down the, if you can split only two teams. Yeah, you can give any one of the team. Like, yeah. So please start give your names.
Sir,
Maybe we'll do one thing. Instead of saying, you just type it in the chat. I'll just ping this. Preeti, you can wait. I mean, let them type themselves and update the comment. Yeah. So let me put this. Yeah. So fill up this and ping in the chat. Everybody can type in the chat. So you can start type your names. Yeah. Just you can edit the same content. You can edit your names. So don't separate. I mean the content. Take the content and edit it. Yeah, edit and put your names. Please. Yeah, I mean increment it. Yeah. So for example, you have to copy the same whoever pasted already. Then you have to put like this. Maybe I'll put it for now. Jaswin, right? Jaswin Pradap. So you have to mention it like this. Okay. So you have to mention it like this. Okay. So yeah, start copy and then put number 3 and put your name. Okay. Meanwhile, anybody have any questions? Please let me know. Okay. And then maybe instruction to Preeti and Praveen. Yeah. So the initial days, you plan for minimum 1 hour of meeting. Okay. And you do the environment setup for them according to your batch members. And then what you can do, like you can just start a basics of environment setup and application. Then ask them to do it in their system. Like maybe you can do it in your system, and then maybe system install. I mean, you can assist them how to install and all. And once they install, then you can start create a Spring Initializer and ask the. I mean, you can run in your application and also ask them to run their system as well. Yeah, the remaining day of time, like after the meeting, remaining time they will spend their own time. Like students, like the people will not be available for whole day. Okay, so they will be available on particular hour. They will let you know. You have to manage your time accordingly. You join to the respective leads, and then get the knowledge like how to create application and how to configure and install as a first day of work. And then when it comes to the second day, you should have your application to be created. What are the steps covered in the day one, that should be completed in the day two. Yeah, so that you need to make sure and create it. And if any doubts, you can connect to the team.